Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has called on the international community to act on Indian atrocities against the Muslims. He was addressing a ceremony marking 1 year since Pakistan's response to Indian aggression in Balakot. Details in this report.
In nearly a year since Pakistan shot down 2 Indian military jets and captured a pilot in a dogfight over Balakot. At a ceremony held to commemorate Pakistan's response to the Indian aggression, Prime Minister Imran Khan said the way Pakistani people dealt with the crisis shows their maturity, but the Indian media and politicians were still beating the drums of war.
I was very proud of how the Pakistani people dealt with the crisis. The fact that the crisis did not aggravate and the situation didn't worsen only shows the maturity of the Pakistani nation.
Warning the world of the Indian government's extremist ideology, Khan said India has taken a very dangerous path. Khan said India will suffer the most due to the RSS ideology based on hatred, which will have consequences for the entire world.
My appeal to the international community is that this is the time to take action, to ask where this huge subcontinent is heading. It's not just a concern of Pakistan. It will concern the whole of the world.
He said the annexation of Kashmir and the new citizenship law violate all human rights.
The India of Gandhi and Nehru, their constitution of pluralism and secularism, everything after 5th August, we knew that was being reversed. And the moment these two legislations took place, the Citizens Act and the Registration Act, clearly this was something which is not done in the modern world.
Tensions between the two countries are still high as millions of Kashmiris are forced to live under India's inhumane curfew. Islamabad has repeatedly called on the international community to help stop the conflict from turning into an all-out war.
Moving on to India, but the situation in New Delhi is still tense after the 4th day of rioting, with reports of Muslim homes and shops being targeted by violent mobs. 24 people have been killed and nearly 200 injured so far in the deadliest violence the Indian capital has seen in decades. The clashes first broke out on Sunday between protesters for and against the controversial citizenship law. New Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has asked the government to deploy the army to control the situation. Authorities have already issued shoot-at-sight orders in the capital amid violent clashes. Journalists have also been shot at and assaulted and asked to prove religious identity by Hindu radicals. Earlier, members of the right-wing RSS organization vandalized 3 mosques in Ashoknagar and Mustafabad areas. Pakistan has recorded a strong protest when the Indian High Commission official over ceasefire violations at the line of control. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Aisha Farooqi said Indian forces have continuously targeted civilian areas along the border. Farooqi said 2 residents of a village in the Nezapi sector sustained serious injuries due to Indian firing. She said India has committed 384 ceasefire violations this year. Farooqi said Pakistan has repeatedly urged the Indian side to respect the 2003 ceasefire arrangement. She said India must allow the UN military observers mission to play its mandated role as per the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the world has recognized Pakistan's role for peace in the region. Speaking in Islamabad, Qureshi said he will attend the signing of the Afghan peace deal on 29th of February in Doha. Referring to the US Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross's visit to Pakistan, he said it is the beginning of a new chapter in the bilateral ties. Earlier, Ross said Washington was willing to enhance investment in Pakistan. He said Washington supported trade and development in the country. Ross's comments came during a meeting with Commerce advisor Abdul Razzaq Dawood. The 2 officials met in Islamabad to discuss trade ties between Washington and Islamabad. The US says Afghanistan's government has agreed to postpone President Ashraf Ghani's swearing-in ceremony for his second term. In a statement, US State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortega said tomorrow's ceremony will be postponed to support the peace process. The statement asked Afghan politicians to focus on peace rather than electoral politics. Afghan Chief Executive Abdullah Abdullah's office has also confirmed the swearing-in ceremony has been postponed for 2 weeks. Meanwhile, speaking to media in Washington, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the U.S. is on the cusp of an enormous political opportunity.
In 19 years of war, this is the first week-long break in violence by all sides if we're successful in achieving it. If, and only if, it's successful, we will sign the U.S.-Taliban agreement coordinated with the Government of National Unity on or about February 29th.
Washington and the Taliban are holding a 7-day partial truce before signing a peace deal on 29th of February in Doha. Now, moving on, Turkey says it will not take even a single step back in Syria's northwestern Idlib. Addressing the parliament, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara will push the government forces away from its military observation posts. Erdogan said he hoped the issue of using airspace in Idlib will be resolved soon. Russia controls the region's airspace and has been bombing Turkey-backed rebels on a daily basis in support of an offensive by the Syrian regime. He said Ankara will ensure the return of the people to their homes in Idlib. Earlier, Erdogan said the US has not yet provided support to Turkey in Syria. He said he was told Washington will not give Patriot defense systems to Turkey for now.
Unfortunately, Russia doesn't want to accept this humanitarian sensitivity. The time that we gave to those who besieged our observation point is ending. We are preparing the plans to liberate our observation posts from the surrounding forces by the end of this month, one way or another.
The Russian-backed government offensive in Idlib has put Syrian citizens up against the wall. Trapped between bombing by Damascus and Turkey's closed border, displaced citizens in northwestern Syria have protested against the operation. What in this report?
After 9 years of war, Idlib is the last rebel bastion in Syria, but it's also the country's biggest humanitarian disaster since 2011. The UN warns 900,000 people have been displaced since Damascus launched its Russia-backed offensive.
We left the town of Hassano almost a week ago. When we came here, I built this hut. We have nothing but God's mercy. I am widowed. I have 3 children, and this kid is an orphan I'm raising. He has no one but me. I've raised him since he was 5 months old.
The situation is such that IDPs are now crammed against the closed border with Turkey. People are forced to camp in the roads and fields without shelter or access to food or water. This has created an irreconcilable wedge between the regime in Damascus and the people of Idlib.
Today, our protest, we are gathered here to tell the whole world that even if there is just 1 inch of Syrian land left, we will continue to say, down with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, down with Russian criminality, down with Iranian criminality.
Turkey already hosts 3.6 million Syrian refugees and cannot take more. Ankara has called for a humanitarian corridor in northwestern Syria to stop the inflow of displaced people. But these calls have been ignored by Damascus' major ally, Russia.
The UN Security Council has approved a resolution to extend targeted sanctions for war-torn Yemen. The resolution was approved after tense negotiations between Britain and Russia, which the latter threatened to veto any mention of Iran, with China and Russia abstaining. 13 out of the 15 members voted for the UK-drafted motion. The sanctions plan includes extending the mandate of the UN experts monitoring the arms embargo imposed in 2015. The resolution extends measures providing for the freezing of assets and travel bans on targeted officials for a year. Among the disputes were references to a report that Yemen's Houthi rebels received drone parts and weapons similar to ones manufactured in Iran. The UK, the US and other Western nations supported the inclusion of the UN experts' findings, but Russia and China objected. The remaining parties of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action met today in Vienna to save the 2015 nuclear deal without much progress. The meeting came after Britain, France and Germany launched a dispute process over Iran's successive pullbacks. Delegates said the dispute resolution mechanism was not even discussed at the meeting. The meeting at the political directors level was chaired by EU senior official Helga Schmidt. In a statement, she said serious concerns were expressed regarding the implementation of Iran's nuclear commitments under the agreement. She said participants acknowledged that the reimposition of US sanctions did not allow Iran to reap the full benefits arising from the sanctions lifting. Earlier, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said this is a chance to stop the escalation before it is too late. Last month, Tehran said it will no longer observe limits on the number of centrifuges used to enrich uranium. The US presidential candidate, Senator Bernie Sanders, has criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, calling him a reactionary racist. Speaking at the Democratic presidential debate, Sanders said Netanyahu's policies towards Palestine were sad and tragic. The Democratic presidential candidate said US Middle East policy should protect Israel but not at the cost of the Palestinian sufferings. Sanders said as president, he would consider moving the US embassy back to Tel Aviv from Jerusalem. In late 2017, President Donald Trump unilaterally recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital that remains at the heart of the conflict. So time for a short break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The WHO says the number of recorded cases of novel coronavirus has risen to 80,988 across 33 countries. But the organization's Europe director, Hans Kluge, says that there is no need to panic regarding the outbreak. Speaking in Rome, he said the mortality rate is about 1% in China, which has 96.5% of the global cases. He said 4 out of 5 patients have mild symptoms and recover. Kluge said the disease response cooperation will be scaled up to ensure all the regions of Italy are equally prepared. Meanwhile, cases in the Middle East and the rest of Europe continue to climb. Earlier, Brazilian government confirmed the first case of coronavirus in Latin America. Greece has also confirmed its first coronavirus case. Iranian cyber police have arrested 24 people accused of online rumor mongering about the spread of the coronavirus in the country. Tehran has been battling to control the outbreak that has claimed 19 lives among 139 infections in the past week. Head of the Iranian police force's cyber unit said 24 people have been arrested and handed over to the judiciary. He said 118 internet users were talked to and let go after receiving warnings. He said the arrests were carried out after the establishment of a special unit to combat rumor mongers. The police force had said the unit will take action over news, pictures or videos that contain rumors meant to disturb the public. Earlier, President Hassan Rouhani said coronavirus must not become an enemy weapon that prevents business in the country. South Korea has restricted exports of the protective masks because of an acute supply shortage caused by the increase in coronavirus cases. Starting today, manufacturers are allowed to export up to only 10% of the masks they produce. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety said a team will discuss ways of compensating the producers for the costs incurred by breaching their contracts. The sellers are banned from exporting masks under a new measure that will be effective until 30th of April. South Korea's daily production of masks has reached 11 million units, double what it was 2 weeks earlier. The country has a shortage of masks because of the rise in demand and outbound shipment. The Maldives says it will join Gambia, the UN's highest court, to seek justice for Myanmar's Rohingya Muslims. The luxury tourist destination has hired prominent human rights lawyer Emil Clooney to represent the country. In a statement, Foreign Minister Abdullah Shahi said he would file a written declaration of intervention at the International Court of Justice. Shahi said the Maldives will support the ongoing efforts to hold the perpetrators accountable for the genocide. He said Maldives cabinet has decided there are strong grounds for intervening in support of the Rohingya people. Last month, the ICJ ordered Myanmar to implement emergency measures to prevent the genocide of the Rohingya people. Meanwhile, Japan has announced an additional $17 million aid for Rohingya Muslims taking refuge in Bangladesh. Tokyo has already granted $95 million to international bodies and the non-governmental organizations. In a statement, the Japanese embassy in Dhaka said funds will be used to improve shelter, child protection, water sanitation, and hygiene. It said the support will be used to improve the quality of life of Rohingyas in the town of Cox's Bazar. The embassy said the Japanese government will provide assistance in Bangladesh through UN agencies. Over 750,000 Muslim refugees were forced to flee Myanmar after the 2017 military massacre in Rakhine State. Malaysian politician Anwar Ibrahim says 3 parties from the former ruling coalition have nominated him for the Prime Minister's office after Mahathir Mohamad's resignation. Speaking in Kuala Lumpur, Ibrahim said the Pakatan Harapan coalition did not agree to set up a backdoor government. Earlier, interim Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad proposed an idea of a grand coalition during meetings with the leaders of major political parties. Mahathir said that he will return as full-time premier if he gets the parliament's support. Mahathir's remarks came after King Abdullah met the country's parliamentarians for a second day as the political turmoil continues in the country. Slovenian President Borut Pahor has named Janez Janša as a candidate for the new Prime Minister. Pahor asked the parliament to confirm Janša, who is the head of the largest centre-right Slovenian Democratic Party. The parliament is expected to confirm him next week. Janša will replace centre-left Prime Minister Marjan Šarec, who resigned last month. He is an admirer of the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The UN says nearly 7.5 million people in South Sudan are in dire need of humanitarian aid due to a 5-year-long civil war. The bloc's migration body says about 1.5 million people remain displaced internally, while 2.2 million are in neighboring countries. International Organization for Migration said it has appealed for nearly $120 million to help IDPs, host community members, and migrants. The appeal was built on a humanitarian response plan for South Sudan for this year to continue humanitarian support it provided in 2019. The UN body said desert locust invasion in South Sudan has been an additional threat to the food security situation. South Sudan slid into crisis in December 2013 when President Salva Kiir sacked Riek Machar as vice president on suspicion of plotting a coup. In Canada, protesters against a gas pipeline have again set up blockades in Vancouver and Toronto in response to yesterday's arrests in Ontario. On Monday, police dismantled a rail barricade in southern Ontario and arrested 10 Indigenous Tyendinaga Mohawk activists. Toronto police said demonstrators blocked a busy Canadian National Railway junction near Hamilton, southwest of Toronto. British Columbia police arrested 14 people for blocking a rail line in New Hazelton and Vancouver Port's main entrance. The Mohawk blockades are in support of Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs who want to stop a gas pipeline project on their land. Egypt has held a military funeral for the former president Hosni Mubarak, who died yesterday aged 91. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi paid tribute to Mubarak's military service.
The funeral ceremony was held at the Field Marshal Tantawi Mosque in eastern Cairo. The Egyptian government has declared 3 days of national mourning. Mubarak's supporters gathered outside the mosque where the funeral was held. After 30 years in power, Mubarak was forced out of office by an Arab Spring uprising in 2011. In 2012, he was sentenced to life after being convicted of complicity in the murder of protesters during the uprising, but he was eventually cleared on appeal. He was also given a 3-year jail sentence for embezzling public funds. Earlier, President Sisi expressed deep condolences to Mubarak's family. A statement paid tribute to his military service during the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, without mentioning his time as president.
In India, 25 people have died after a private bus fell into a river in the northern state of Rajasthan. Police say 3 others were injured in the accident in the Bundi district. Officials said the bus was on its way to the district of Savai Madhopur from the city of Kota. They said the driver apparently lost control of the bus while crossing a bridge on the Mej River. 13 people died at the scene while 10 others succumbed to their injuries on their way to the hospital. 10 women and 3 children are among those dead. In England, residents have been evacuated from their homes in Worcestershire County as water levels rose above the defensive barriers. The downpour has swelled the River Severn, triggering fears of floods. Local media said severe flood warnings have been issued for Ironbridge and Shrewsbury counties after days of heavy rain. It said flood levels could potentially top Bewdley's highest ever recorded levels as the water is expected to rise. Houses on the river banks were partially submerged in the towns of Bewdley and Ironbridge. Flooding has caused a widespread chaos across Britain after 2 severe storms, Kiara and Dennis, hit within a week. Teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg has met Pakistan Nobel Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai at the University of Oxford. Both women have shot to global fame after standing up for major global issues, in this case, climate change and women's education. Afterward, Yousafzai shared their picture on social media, saying Thunberg is the only friend she would skip school for. After the meeting, the Swedish activist said she met her role model. Christian Dior has turned back the clock for its latest runway show in Paris with 1970s inspired looks. Along with her teenage memories, designer Maria Grazia Chiuri explored feminist references which have become a recurrent theme for the brand. More about the colorful event in this report.
The autumn-winter styles at the Paris Fashion Week show were inspired by a 70s feminist activist, Carla Lonzi, and Dior's creative director for 30 years, Marc Bohan. Illuminated messages such as consent and women's love is unpaid labor hung above the catwalk inside a pop-up installation in the Jardin des Tuileries.
Consent is a word that means that when I say yes, I say yes. When I say no, I say no. But there is also a moment that I'm thinking about if I say yes or I say no. That is the yellow moment that we have to define with the color.
Consent was one of the catchphrases of the show, where Hollywood actresses acknowledged the watershed moment in the verdict handed to Harvey Weinstein. A former movie producer, Weinstein has been found guilty of sexual assault and rape.
I think that the support women are giving women now, for the most part, it's just the way it should be. You know, it's connecting all of us in all these different countries and all these different fields.
Dior is one of the first major French brands to kick off Paris Fashion Week, which closes the latest season of shows that have whizzed through New York, London, and Milan.
More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Hong Kong has unveiled a record budget deficit caused by extra spending to jumpstart its recession-hit economy. The government has said it will give cash handouts of $1,280 each to 7 million permanent residents. The Finance Secretary, Paul Chan, said the city recorded its first budget deficit in 15 years during the 2019-20 at 1.5% of GDP. Chan published an annual budget that commits to 120 billion Hong Kong dollars to help alleviate the economic downturn. The new budget includes profit and salary tax breaks, as well as low-interest loans for businesses struggling to pay staff wages. Chan said Hong Kong's economy faces enormous challenges. He predicted performance of between 0.5% growth and 1.5% contraction this year. The Wall Street stocks have jumped higher at the open after facing their worst 4-day percentage fall. Investors drop fears from the global spread of the coronavirus on the global economy. Major indices climbed over 1% in a comeback from this week's rout. Jump in the shares of United Health, Microsoft and Visa led the Dow Jones upward stream. Nasdaq Composite Index also rose over gain in shares of Apple, Facebook and Amazon. The S&P 500 index also traded nearly 1% higher. European markets are trading lower as the new coronavirus outbreak continued to weigh on global investor sentiment. Major stocks have shed values following panic selling as fear grew over the rapidly spreading coronavirus outbreak outside China. Frankfurt's DAX is trading over 1% lower. London's FTSE 100 and CAC 40 in Paris has lost nearly 1% each. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses, closing over 1% lower. Shanghai Composite and Hang Seng lost ground. Nikkei 225 lost about 0.75% on the fears of slowing global growth. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil prices lost nearly 1% over global demand concerns. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Special.